Hello everyone, welcome back to the new news. My name is Paul and I hope that everyone is having a fantastic day. Tomorrow's Friday, of course, which means you're wrapping up the end of the day here with us, and we're doing 24 hours of news and review with what everything is going on throughout the world. And obviously there's a lot of stuff happening throughout the world. So with that, I really hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, and if not, I hope you find that safety and security in the very near future. I really don't want any of the viewers to become a statistic, and some of the situations that we're talking about here on the channel. And there are a lot of situations. I'm talking about everything from ongoing conflicts to famine to drought to you name it, just ongoing humanitarian crises, some of which have been going on for decades, as whether that's food, water insecurities, or just general insecurities regarding the safety within your country. And so with that, luckily you guys have made an awesome community, and the whole point of this project is to not just deliver the news, but to be the news that gives back. We want to be able to give back to the very issues we talk about here, and you guys have been awesome in supporting us in that endeavor, and even more awesome for supporting the organizations. And that's because if you check out the video description below on every single one of our videos, you're going to see that we have a constant list of different fundraisers and charities that you can actually go to and actually donate to. These are all verified by us. We have gone through and vetted each of these independently to make sure that these are official organizations for your safety and the safety of our viewers. And we want to make sure that you guys are safe when you're donating, that the money's actually getting to help people, where that rolls into our second point, which is that all of these organizations, 80% or more, go directly to helping the people, whether that's, providing them with humanitarian aid, or when it comes to Ukraine, with some of these organizations providing, for the war effort to help them fight off the Russians there. And so 80% or more goes to their programs. And in some cases, it's much higher. And that's awesome. It's going to, that means that 20% or less is actually going to those salaries for CEOs and other high-level officials within the organizations, and is paying for those administration's costs, which we want to see those cut down as much as possible. So if you don't believe us, you can go through and vet any of these organizations independently, and I highly encourage you to also check up with the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Internet Fraud. They have an entire section of their website dedicated to it, and to make sure while we do try to protect you as viewers, please be cognizant the best protection is knowledge and yourself. So please be wary of that. But if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, give us a like and subscribe, and let your friends know about us. The more people that are here, of course, more people get to enjoy the news the way that we deliver it. But even more so, and the more important point to it, is the more people that are here, ultimately, the more people that can donate to these organizations, and the more of a meaningful impact we as a community can have on the ongoing efforts throughout the globe to help people. And like I said, that's the whole point of this project. We're never doing super chats. We're never going to be pushing merchandise to you guys. So 100% of what we're doing is for charity. Once we get large enough, we'll be posting those charities directly to the stream. So thank you so far for supporting us in that endeavor, and also especially supporting the organizations below. But with that, we automatically jump down here into the news and get started with the day with a special report coming directly out of Ukraine. And what we're seeing is a couple of different things, but we start off with a little bit of a lighthearted topic, and that would be here. Patron takes a road trip today. Patron is the loving, bomb-sniffing dog that we have had posted here on the channel. He is an awesome little pupper. I would do anything for this dog. He is awesome. He's found, upwards of about 200 to 300 different pieces of unexploded ordnance between the Kyiv and Chernihiv Oblast, where we know that he's been operating. He's been awarded medals, but he's loved by children. And today he decided to take a road trip, as we can see here, where he's all packed into the back of the SUV. All ready to go. I mean, look at this dog. How could you not love this dog? There's no way not to. But as we move over here, we can see the reason he took this road trip is because they actually went and visited one of the largest children's hospitals inside of Ukraine, where we can see that he went there and just kind of was a morale booster to the kids that were injured during this war. So let's take a look here.
Тобто ви маєте вимикати електричні прилади з розетки. Ви це знаєте? Знаєте, так? У мене така
Патрон в Охмадиті. Звісно, одна з таких нагород – це медаль від президента України Володимира Зеленського. Інша нагорода – велосипед.
Дітки Охмадиту намалювали патрона. Наші дітки готувались до зустрічі з патроном.
So absolutely adorable, and come on, how could you not, once again, how can you not love this dog? This dog is awesome. Please join the Cult of Patron. We do have cookies. But the news goes pretty, steep downhill from there, though, and that's because of several things. But most importantly, an astonishing number of theater ballistic missiles have been fired into Ukraine by Russian forces throughout the duration of this war. This is coming from Alexei Heromonov, who is the deputy head and the main operational director of the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And he has stated, quote, "Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian troops have fired about 626 Iskander and Caliber cruise missiles at Ukraine." Immense number of theater ballistic missile usage within this country and against this country. It's a massive amount of ordnance being used against what statistically saying is a much smaller military force and should not have fought on this long, on paper, but they certainly have. And that definitely shows the number of missiles being fired. Definitely shows where those frustrations on the part of the Russian military are really, showing. Pretty clearly. As we jump over here to Kharkiv, we can see where some of this has occurred, because that's the only thing that can hit Kharkiv at this point. Kharkiv has been under sustained bombardment and threat of attack throughout the entire duration of this war. What makes it different now is the fact that there is no strategic or tactical importance of Kharkiv to the Russian forces at this point. Any chances they had of actually taking Kharkiv have been long gone. And it has caused a lot of frustration by the Russian military, but they continue to shell Kharkiv rather indiscriminately with the use of Iskander-M missile systems launched from Belgorod, Russia. But we'll get to that a little bit later. And we can see that here, where Russian aggressors, or quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the city of Kharkiv on July 7th. 3 citizens were injured, and that's coming from Oleh Suvanov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. As we jump down here, we get into Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, and we know that shelling has been occurring almost continuously over the last about 48 to 72 hours. The reason for this is because this is leading up to a precursor. This is a precursor bombardment. I talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I want to talk about it again today to really emphasize this. I went through and I was reading on some of the other articles being posted, and it seems like in general, military military analysts and strategists are really agreeing with this point, at least from what I've been reading today in my off time. And the point is that the reason that these cities are being bombarded is because these are going to be the sites in the next major battles within the Donbass. Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. Slavyansk is obviously the city they have to go through to get to Kramatorsk, and Kramatorsk is receiving shelling now, pretty substantial, in fact. And that's because Kramatorsk is a major rail hub, and it's a major crossroads for the logistical network to link up, Ukrainian forces and get them resupplied. Cutting that off makes it extremely difficult for Ukrainian forces to put up a meaningful resistance, as they no longer have a massive amount of supplies that can be brought up from these areas and through these areas in order to resupply the front lines, which comes up here into where this kind of bulge has been sitting. We know that Ukrainian forces have essentially lost all of the Luhansk region, and we know that this is because they were in danger of becoming encircled, and they did withdraw as a result of this. Putting Slavyansk and Kramatorsk in another offensive within these regions, along with another offensive towards Bakhmut, which we've been suspecting for a while was going to be another one of the main follow-on objectives, would once again put Ukrainian forces in danger of encirclement. And so that would cause them, to conduct another tactical withdrawal, seeing as there's not really a whole lot else they would do. Precursor bombardments are important when it comes to Russian military strategy. The reason for this is because it's really broken down into three segments. You have a precursor bombardment, which saturates an area with explosives and softens up resistance. We see this when you're talking about the Battle of Severodonetsk, the Battle of Lysychansk, Lyman. You're talking about the battle within Rubizhne. We can pick out any other battles that you want to take across the front, and all of them are precursored with heavy bombardments. That softens up the enemy resistance, at least the resistance on the Ukrainian part for the Russians, quote unquote. That's kind of what that plays to their strategy and their military doctrine. That first phase of their doctrine is immediately followed up with a massive mechanized armor offensive, or an armored spearhead, where they take these highly mechanized and motorized battalion tactical groups and they drive them in, and they basically drive them as a spearhead to break through Ukrainian lines and conduct encirclement movements and destroy Ukrainian forces and cause a rout if possible. We know that that's not usually the case, but what it does do is it breaks through and breaks through their lines and opens up gaps in their lines that then Russian infantry on the third phase can use to follow up and exploit those lines, conducting those larger encirclement movements, and then closing with and destroying the pockets of resistance within the encircled areas. That's the strategy. That's what we've seen done thus far, or attempted to be done thus far, with really limited and varying levels of success on the Russian forces' part. And that's pretty much what we're seeing here. All that this indicator is that these are precursor bombardments. This is the first phase. Especially the shelling of Slavyansk more so, where many citizens have left, but many are still residing within the region. And we are expecting a full-on offensive towards Slavyansk in the coming days as a result of this. So keep your eyes peeled for that. It seems a lot of military strategists also agree with this standpoint that we took yesterday, as I read on today as more information has come out. But that really brings us to that shelling on Kramatorsk, which is another one of those objectives. And, quote, this is coming from Pavel Krayenko, who is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. Rocket attack on the city of Kramatorsk in the Donetsk region on July 7th. One person was killed and 6 citizens were injured. 6 local buildings were damaged, including a building of the hotel and a residential high-rise building. And we actually have some footage from today's strikes.
Подмышкой. Это тут.
В своей квартире, да?
Фамилия Тарасов. А голова? Губа я вижу. Кто заживет? А на голове тоже рассечена? Нет.
А что знаете о погибшем? Где-то в этом доме он живет, да?
А что я могу сказать? Сосед мой с первого этажа.
Он на улице, наверное, был, да? Или это...
Да, сидел на улице.
So pretty extensive, obviously. They're still conducting these bombardments. Slavyansk is definitely going to be hit much worse, as that will be the first phase. We saw this kind of with Severodonetsk and Lysychansk being so close together. Severodonetsk took the main brunt. There was some shelling intermediate within Lysychansk. There was heavy shelling, though, in Severodonetsk. And as Russian forces pushed into Severodonetsk, you saw them shift fires from one end of the city to the next end of the city, and then that prevents blue on blue or friendly fire. And then from then, as Russian forces pushed deeper into the city, and artillery usage just wasn't going to be effective or realistic for use in the type that they use, which is usually saturation bombardments with BM-21 Grad systems, firing the 122 millimeter Katyushas. They shifted from Severodonetsk entirely and shifted onto Lysychansk. We can kind of see that similarity here, or that being parodied here, with the heavy shelling of Slavyansk being continued, and that is intensifying greatly. and with some additional shelling to Kramatorsk as a precursor to the main barrage, as Russian forces are expected to push towards Slavyansk and then begin their assault on the city itself. However, that is the prediction. Once again, military planners and strategists and myself have been proven very wrong before, and this could just be a supporting effort for other operations ongoing into the area to divert tension away from other planned operations ongoing, because that is what's happening. Planned operations, Russian forces stated that they are taking a tactical pause. However, what this means is that what they're doing is they're reconcentrating their forces. The Luhansk Oblast has been taken. That objective has been seized. The massive troop concentrations that were trying to close the gap on Ukrainian forces and conduct that encirclement are no longer needed, as the encirclement isn't there, and they now must remove those forces, bring it down to force levels that are only there to hold the line and conduct minor offensive operations. And really, now that part of the Luhansk region that the major fighting has been taking part in, and that part of the Donetsk region as well, that's now is just going to be a supporting effort. And the main efforts are going to shift towards probably Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Bakhmut. So we're going to see much higher concentrations of Russian forces within these regions within the next coming days. We move down here where this is in Toretsk, which is in the Donetsk Oblast, and 3 are dead, including 1 child, as a result of Russian shelling within this region. Quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the city of Toretsk in the Donetsk region on July the 6th. 3 people were killed, including 1 child. A private house was destroyed, and that's coming from Pavlo Kryenko, who is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. And that really sounds off across the entire board when it comes to the shelling within these regions. We're seeing Russian troops shelled the Donetsk region on July the 6th. 7 people were killed, 2 citizens were injured, once again coming from Pavlo Kryenko. And we really kind of see that across the board when it comes to the areas or the entire front line is just continuous shelling. Ukrainian forces are, according to the most recent reports, expending between 4,000 to 6,000 rounds of 155 millimeter NATO standard artillery. However, the Russian forces are expending about 10 times that amount in artillery going back. So while it's not necessarily in the quantities that Ukraine would prefer their artillery from NATO countries, it is making a meaningful impact. And as we move further south here, we can see some of that meaningful impact in the city of Donetsk itself, where, once again, a Russian oil depot has been hit by Ukrainian artillery within the city of Donetsk. And that has once again ignited that content, and it's really producing that thick, black, indicative smoke of an oil fire or a fuel fire.
Попали.
And that kind of news continues on as we move further down the line, and we can see, this is just in general here in the Donbass. NATO weaponry has really done a number on the Russian logistics. Over the past week, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 16 Russian positions with ammunition depots in 10 Ukrainian settlements. That's coming from the Department of Strategic Communications of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And we have shown many of those right here on the channel. When these things are hit, it is not a small affair. These are large amounts of ammunition all stockpiled in one place. They get hit with Ukrainian artillery, whether that be HIMARS or whether that be 155s. It doesn't matter, because once one of these goes off and the fire starts, the rest start cooking off. They're extremely dangerous situations to the local civilian population, but they are necessary when it comes to the war. Destroying Russian logistics, the economies of a nation and their ability to supply their forces, that logistical capability is what wins a war. You can win a battle with, the troops you have and the ammunition they're already given, but when they've depleted that ammunition in combat, what are they going to use when the counterattack comes from the opposition side? And that's really what we see, is that Ukrainian forces are targeting substantial amounts of logistical hubs and command centers to degrade their command, control, and communications capabilities, at least on the Russian side, as well as destroying their logistical infrastructure to include fuel depots, ammunition depots, oil depots, to make sure that Russian forces can't be continuously supplied in any meaningful manner to continue mobile operations throughout this front. If you don't have fuel, you don't have oil, you don't have ammunition, you don't have food, you don't have bandages, you can't fight a war. And Ukraine is trying to deplete that from Russian forces every single day. And that's really where we see a lot of these strikes occurring. And once again, these are ammunition depots, some of them rather large, including the ones that are further behind the lines. That's going to do substantial damage to their ability to actually supply their forces and continue any offensive operations, and degrade their ability to continue a substantial defense against any Ukrainian counteroffensives. As we jump down here into Mariupol, we have a couple of different points coming out today. The first one is that 1,800 more people are reportedly dead here in Mariupol over the last 2 months. Quote, over the past 2 months, about 1,800 Ukrainian citizens died in Mariupol. That's coming from Petro Andrushenko, who is the advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, reportedly still in the city of Mariupol itself. He's able to get a lot of information out of Mariupol and has reported it to the wider world. It's not the only thing. The pillaging has continued as well. Instead of building houses and fixing the infrastructure in Mariupol, this week Russians disassembled a fountain and shipped it out of the city. The other people who also did this was actually Nazi Germany, who, when they captured Mariupol, they actually took this. They took the fountain that was actually, this one was built in its stead. So they never received that fountain back. Obviously, they built a new one in its own place, and now this has also been disassembled by the Russians and shipped out. And so it was there, now it's not. And that's not the only thing. Even more damning evidence has coming out, as mass grave sites near Mariupol have doubled in size, at least according to the newest satellite images that we have gotten. The last time I reported on the size of these mass graves was roughly, oh, it's on a loop here, was roughly about 2 months ago, or about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and we had said, hey, there's 3 different mass grave sites that we know of that has significantly increased in size, and as you can see here, that is the case. I mean, just look, they have doubled quite literally in size and scope. This is going to add to additional figures, but when we talk about mass grave sites, you got to think the mass grave sites in Bucha were hodgepodge. These were dug by occupational forces, not using heavy equipment, not deep behind enemy lines. They're just dug there and thrown, and most of the time not even covered. They're mostly just open air pits. These are being, large industrial equipment is being used to create, some of these being 10 times larger than, anything that was built, anything that was dug in Bucha or Hostomel or Irpin. I mean, instead of we're talking about 40 bodies, we're talking about hundreds of bodies, thousands of bodies. I mean, the scope of the destruction of Mariupol and the loss of life has a lack for words if it were not for the 1948 Geneva Convention. And at this point, the amount of death and destruction, the amount of war crimes committed and perpetrated, really brings it to light that this is really something that can only be described as systematic, which therefore would be a crime against humanity, and which falls into the realm of ethnic cleansing and genocide, which is where those arguments are coming from. And these are the indicators to show that. That's what we're seeing. That's what is being visualized here on satellite imagery from Mariupol. The loss of life is immense, and it shouldn't have occurred in the first place. Urban combat is terrible enough. The indiscriminate shelling of a civilian city and destroying it completely along with its residents inside is absolutely, it's not just, it goes past the word of a tragedy. which is really what has been emphasized for some time now. Go over here into the Kherson Oblast, where Ukraine has intensified their shelling against Russian targets here in the Kherson Oblast. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed 3 Russian ammunition depots in the Mykolaiv region and one Russian fuel depot in Kherson on July the 6th. Now, fighting, this is coming from the Operational Command South. Now, fighting has been ongoing throughout the entire region for some time. Most of those ammunition depots are going to be located up here, but we're also going to be seeing that those fuel depots being destroyed down here, which would be in reference to the strike that we talked about yesterday. And once again, we see that this is the plan of the Ukrainian forces, the targeting of logistics vehicles and logistics infrastructure and logistics stockpiles to degrade Russia's capability of committing to more offensive engagements and to degrade their defensive capabilities is really what the point of this is. You can't supply them, they can't fight. And so that is going to be probably continual for some time, especially with the introduction of HIMARS, which we've already seen used very effectively by the Ukrainians. That introduction of HIMARS, their missiles are accurate within 1 meter. Russian missiles are accurate within 500. So it gives them a great advantage over Russian capabilities to actually pinpoint and destroy these targets. Over here in Mykolaiv, a FSB agent was actually arrested. This is coming out from the SBU. Ukrainian agents of the SBU actually arrested this Russian FSB agent who was acting as a forward observer and intelligence analyst here for Russian forces within Mykolaiv. They recovered weapons, ammunition, and identifying materials, and he was he was coordinating those strikes that we have seen on Mykolaiv. He was coordinating the adjustments on those, at least according to the security services of Ukraine. And we jump down here into Odessa. Moldova's tanker was hit once again. Russia fired 2 X-22 missiles towards Odessa. One of them hit the abandoned Moldovan tanker. It was struck earlier in the war, and it's currently sitting abandoned at the docks here in Odessa. But it's been pretty much ravaged by this war, along with everything else. And hitting it again, I don't think is going to do anything but basically be a double tap for the ship and possibly just sink it in the harbor if it hasn't already. From my understanding, the crew is not aboard the ship still. Jump out here into the Black Sea. Gas platforms, which are currently still burning. Well, I should say gas, but really oil platforms. These were being used as satellite and instrument stations by the Russian forces. They were hit probably a couple of weeks ago, I want to say a couple of weeks ago, by Ukrainian forces, which fired missiles at them and successfully destroyed them. They have been burning since then, and they continue to burn. This is going to turn quickly into a rather large ecological disaster. And we can see that here from some new satellite footage that still shows that these things are burning. The Russian forces apparently could not really conceive of a reasonable way of actually putting out these fires, and so they have abandoned the platforms in their entirety. And that actually wraps up everything inside of the country of Ukraine. Quite a lot has happened inside of Ukraine. A lot of artillery usage, but that's something that we covered both yesterday and today and have been covering and will continue to cover, as the use of artillery is very influential in this war's outcome. Heavy weaponry and that artillery usage, much more akin to what we saw during World War I, is going to continue to provide a very significant balance of power, whether that is, and when I say that, I don't mean Ukraine has less artillery, therefore they are less powerful. There's actually a 1-to-1 power parity. The reason why is because NATO artillery generally is more accurate and also they are going to be they're also going to have a much further range than Russian artillery, putting them at a much better advantage having that standoff. The Russians have to close the gap with them, putting them well within range of Ukrainian artillery. We jump up here into Belarus. Where we see that the Gamel region of Belarus is now under full Russian control, essentially. The Russians are currently establishing a new Russian military bases within the region. It is reported that a missile division of the Iskander-M operational tactical system complex and of S-400 Triumph division are already currently stationed within the region. But Moscow has given us quite a lot of information today, and the first thing we have is that Putin has stated that Russia is just getting started. As much as I have a hard time believing this, during his speech to the parliamentary leaders on Thursday, more than 4 months into this war, Putin boasted that Russia has barely gotten started in Ukraine and is just getting into its stride. Putin also referred to the possibility of negotiations. He dared the West to try to defeat it on the battlefield. Quote, everyone should know that, by and large, we haven't started anything yet in earnest. At the same time, we don't reject peace talks, but those who reject them should know that the further it goes, the harder it will be for them to negotiate with us. You actually have the video here.
Во главе США на протяжении десятилетий ведет себя в отношении России исключительно агрессивно. Наши предложения о создании системы равной безопасности в Европе отвергнуты. Инициативы о совместной работе по проблеме противоракетной обороны отклонены. Предупреждения о неприемлемости расширения НАТО, особенно за счет бывших республик Советского Союза, проигнорированы. Даже сама идея о возможной интеграции России в этот самый Североатлантический альянс на этапе наших, когда казалось, безоблачных отношений с НАТО, судя по всему, показалась его членам абсурдной. А почему? Да потому что такая страна, как Россия, просто не нужна им. Вот почему. И именно поэтому поддерживали терроризм, сепаратизм.
So I just want to point something out. Here on this very channel, we have talked about where Russian forces have had to pull T-80s out of field storage, not even out of like warehouses, but out of just pulling them out of fields and refurbishing them. We've seen a large decrease in Russian military capability. We hardly see T-80s and T-90s fielded anymore. We haven't seen, we haven't seen any real amount of optics on the side of the Russian forces, night vision on the side of the Russian forces, but we have seen Mosin Nagants, we have seen armor, body armor, and helmets that came straight out of Cold War stockpiles. When I mean Cold War stockpiles, I'm talking like 50s and 60s stockpiles. We've seen World War I machine guns being employed on both sides of the war, the Maxim machine gun specifically. We have seen, we've seen T-62s pulled out of storage, which is heavily outdated on the battlefield, and being put into active combat and destroyed. We've seen the Tochka U system, which the Russians themselves have stated is an outdated weapon system for them to use when they used it on Kramatorsk. And we pointed in that episode alone here on the channel 6 different points leading up, sometimes within over a week period of time, leading up to the strike on Kramatorsk, where Russia was fielding the Tochka U system. So pretty extensive evidence that Russia doesn't have much more it can give. I would say it's probably very easy to flip these statements and come to that reality and come to the reality of the situation. The amount of losses Russia has taken, manpower wise, they're fielding the Syrians, which if you're fielding the Syrians, you're in some pretty bad stuff. not to say like Syrians can't fight or anything. Like I served alongside the Kurds when I was in Syria myself. I'm just saying that the Syrian, the Syrian mercenaries they had were coming from the SNA side, the Assyrian National Army side, and those guys do not have any idea of what they're doing from personal experience. And I wouldn't trust them in combat whatsoever. We know that they are being used in combat. These weapon systems that they're using are far too long outdated to be effective in combat. They're running into manpower shortages, logistical shortages. They started off not having enough logistical vehicles for their initial invasion force, let alone the casualties that they have sustained. They're outranged by a lot of Western artillery at this point. They have taken significant losses when it comes to major capture points. They had to abandon their original objectives. They had to abandon Kharkiv, essentially, as they got pushed back and it's no longer viable. So they have to hit it from Belgorod, Russia, just to conduct any kind of strike against the target it possibly can. They've shifted from using strategic strikes into using old-fashioned Soviet doctrine of bombarding an area with saturation bombardments. This is not the modern Russia. This is not the second most powerful military in the world. Initially in the war, I would have said Russia was a world power. I don't think that's true anymore. Russia is very much a regional power. Right, that doesn't mean it's any less dangerous now. There's nothing more dangerous than somebody who has nothing left to lose, and that's really where Russia, I think, is at this point. But Russia doesn't really have anything else it can provide to the situation. What are they going to do? They're going to go pull tanks off their monumental pedestals and fire up their engines after 50 years? They're going to start pulling T-34s and fielding them from World War II? What if there's mobilization? You could talk, general, partial or complete mobilization of Russian forces. They don't have the logistical capacity to outfit them all, nor do they have enough men to train them. Okay, you want to talk about, so there's a lot of talk about Nazis in the chat. Yeah, once again, that goes back to my statements of yesterday. Listen, I have my own personal opinions on a lot of this stuff, but, yeah, I would really appreciate if you didn't call anyone a Nazi, in the chat here on the stream, guys. Once again, I don't want that. That's not what a Nazi is, first of all. And secondly, we're not going to degrade other people on this channel. I'm not degrading other people. I go through and I point out strategic and tactical things that I know about and can observe, but I'm not calling people Nazis or rats or, anything else, or orcs. I'm not calling them anything. I'm calling them what their units are called, or what their whatever. Russian civilians, I'm calling them, by their unit names, the Azov Battalion. I'm calling them by whatever. I'm not calling them, Nazis or rats or orcs or any of the other derogatory terms. So please don't do that in my chat. I do not appreciate it. That is not the community I would like to have here. I have no problem having intellectual discussions, and we can talk about the Nazi Party, which is the fact that they are the National Socialists of Germany. That is what Nazi is, the National Socialist Party of Germany, Workers' Party of Germany. So you have to be German, and you have to be part of the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany, and then you can only then can you be a Nazi. That is what it is. Everything else is just being used as a derogatory term. Moving back onto the news topics here, but everything is fine? You're telling me everything is fine after this? Russia's largest bank institution, Spear Bank, has run out of chips to put in their credit and debit cards, and they have now resorted to, wait for it, scrapping old cards. So they're scrapping their old cards and using this process of re-implementation. It's a new genius solution that will save about 1 billion rubles this year, which is a whole whopping $15,854 US. Thank you, Rosebolt, for letting us know this information. The economy continues to cripple. That's not the only thing. I want to put this to rest. I'm so tired of hearing this. I want to just put it to rest here on the channel. So I am. And that is the fact that I'm tired of talking about biolabs. I have been following the war in Ukraine since it started, since before this officially started, because I had some personal concerns with it in regards to what was going to happen, to me personally and everything else. I also worked with a fellow YouTuber who I worked from researching, and this was a constant thing that was brought up, and I am tired of hearing about it. So, luckily for me, my cousin's actually a microbiologist, which means that she works in a laboratory that specifically does this work. In fact, she assisted on working. She was one of the scientists in the lab that actually worked with the COVID-19 variant, trying to find a vaccine for it. So I know a little bit about this. I wouldn't say a lot. I'm not my cousin, who's an actual microbiologist, but I have a general understanding of how the process works. And I want to finally put this to bed, because there have been many there has been a lot of Russian justifications for war. Everything from Nazism to NATO expansionism, Russophobia, ethnic cleansing, genocide, cultural persecution, and of course, the biolabs. The biolabs. Probably the worst justification of this all, not that any of these are actual justifications for war, but biolabs. So, Russia seems to fail to understand the importance of studying pathogens and how they spread, and especially with highly infectious and fatal diseases. Because so we're just going to go here. So this is from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and at MOD Russia. We're just going to follow those guys real quick. At MOD Russia casts a new light on the U.S. military biological activity in Ukraine. Ukraine and other post-Soviet states have become a testing ground for biological weapons, not only for Washington, but also other NATO allies. And they give us several pictures here. The study of the prevalence of the Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever virus and hantaviruses implementation period from Texas A&M. Okay, the study of the Congo Crimean, and the spread of the ticks that carry them. Here, we're talking about swine flu, African swine flu fever. But how, and the spread of these, and the, improving. So, T04 Veterinary TAP 6. Risk analysis of the spread of African swine fever virus in the wildlife in Ukraine, improving diagnosis, detection, and prevention. It goes over and over again here. Over and over and over. So, why is this important? The Ebola epidemic in West Africa, right? 28,006 people, more than 11,000 deaths. Why? The project aims to improve the diagnostic capabilities of especially dangerous pathogens laboratory at the anti-plague station of the Menshikov Anti-Plague Institute in the Ministry of Health of Ukraine to detect particularly dangerous viral diseases, including Ebola. And they talk about why this is, it's dangerous. There's some biosafety concerns when it comes to culturing live Ebola virus cells in the lab. False positives, airborne contacts. And this is all, of course, from the Russians. And why is this? Why do they gravitate to this? Because it's an easy target. It's an easy target. It's not even a good target. It's just easy. 10-year cooperation and alleged reduction of biological threats. Well, here's the thing, right? Like, Ukraine in 2014, right? Like, they're citing things from 2005, by the way, which is when Russia had essential complete political control and that Ukraine was a proxy state. 2014, the United States rules and actually improves a lot of the conditions for these biological laboratories inside of Ukraine. Yeah, that was 8 years ago. Congratulations. Yes. But the thing is that all of this, right? All of this, why would the DoD be interested in this? Why would Texas A&M be interested in this? Probably because we don't all want to die to Ebola or swine flu. You know what? You know how you find out how to build better techniques in order to detect swine flu and detect Ebola and COVID and everything else? You culture live specimens in the lab. You have to culture live specimens in the laboratory. Why do you think there's still live specimens of anthrax? Why do you think there's still live specimens of diseases that were eradicated nearly a century ago by vaccines? Because we still need to find better ways to detect it in case there's ever a resurgence. We need to find better ways to detect it. We have to, and that requires having to conduct animal studies. That has to mean that highly secured biological areas laboratories have to be developed. They're here in the United States. They're in Ukraine. Russia probably has some. No one wants to talk about the Russian laboratories also working on their own COVID-19 vaccine, that they had to create their own live cultures of COVID-19 inside of contained facilities. Why would we do this? Because that's how you prevent the spread of it. That's how you identify when it happens. That's how we have the tools to identify this stuff. Yes, there are biological laboratories in Ukraine. No, they're not weapons facilities. We just don't all want to die to a dangerous, contagious, fatal plague. I don't think anyone can wrap their head around this. Once again, that's what my cousin worked on for COVID-19. She's a scientist in a laboratory that worked on the vaccine for COVID-19, and she had live specimens of COVID-19 and worked on them, and has worked on other diseases. You have to do this. Risks have to be taken anytime you want to achieve something important. That includes, yes, are there shortcomings in biosafety? Were there shortcomings in biosafety in Ukraine? Yes. Those were addressed in the reports, so that way they could better divert funding where it needed to go and revamp policies. Most of this documentation also happened either prior to the revolution in Ukraine or immediately following it, 8 years ago. The only danger of any of these pathogens spreading happened when the war actually broke out. That's the only time, this right now is the only significant time that these pathogens have had a major chance of actually spreading. And you know what? It wasn't even the pathogens out of the biolabs that spread. It was cholera. It was cholera in Mariupol. Because the sanitary situation in Mariupol is so deplorable that 1,800 people have died in Mariupol because of just the sanitary and unsafe conditions. So that is why this is finally going to bed, because there is no substantial reason that Russia can justify a war based off of something they probably have in 20 different sites around Moscow for the exact same reason. We're not building chlorine gas in Ukraine, guys. We're not. We're making sure that people don't die from Ebola. I'm so sorry that requires a biological laboratory, which exists in every single modern hospital in the world. From there, we jump up into Helsinki, where we actually see here that Finland has passed a law to strengthen the security on the Russian border. The parliament today voted in favor of legislation that would allow barriers on the country's border with Russia and to enable the closure of a 1,300-kilometer or 800-mile frontier from asylum seekers in the case of exceptional circumstances. The bill on preparedness was passed by the supermajority that allows Parliament to fast-track laws amid fears Russia could retaliate over Finland's plans to join the NATO military alliance. It also allows the government to decide to build fences and other barriers near the Finnish borders and direct all asylum applications to one of several border crossings. We jump over here into Birmingham, where once again we get into the war crimes. And this is because the OSCE adopted the Birmingham Resolution today in their annual meeting there in Birmingham in the United Kingdom. And they adopted by a majority vote of all national delegations the Birmingham Resolution, which one demands the immediate removal of Russian troops, and that the organization actually believes that the war and subsequent war crimes may be considered genocide and or at least crimes against humanity, based off of the OSCE initial report. They also say that Putin and Lukashenko are ultimately responsible and need to be held accountable for the efforts or for the war, and they're ultimately at fault for the crimes against humanity. This is very similar rhetoric to what we've heard the entire war. The difference is this is legally binding. The OSCE dictates a lot of international law, and that's actually a delegation, part of a delegation that Russia is a part of. In fact, the way that the investigation was conducted was based on the Moscow method, basically, which is they have to go and actually, they have 3 weeks to investigate claims, and that was adopted by Moscow, led by the Russians, and they were found guilty on their own accord. And we have here, if you guys go onto our website, we actually post, you can go and check this out right now. We post the map for every episode that we do right there before the stream on our website, and this is here. So this is the official Birmingham Declaration, if you guys wanted to take a look at it. It covers a wide variety of topics, to include journalists, women journalists and politicians, combating violence against them, sustainable development, so all of this, and especially when it comes to, of course, human rights and humanitarian questions. And another big piece of news out of London. Despite what we reported yesterday, a 180 turn has occurred, and that is because Boris Johnson has agreed to step down as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He initially has officially announced his resignation today. Johnson said that he would stay on the post until the Conservative Party has chosen another leader, which they are expected to do by September. It should take between anywhere from 2 to 3 months for the process, which we discussed yesterday, to occur, where they will have, their party, the Conservative Party, will vote in order to, and they will have, they will vote on these candidates until there's only 2, and then there will be a vote of the entire party, in which case about 150,000 people across the United Kingdom will vote on the individual, and that individual will now be the new Prime Minister. Until then, Boris Johnson is expected to essentially just be quiet. He's supposed to simply hold the state together and hold the position and not really do anything until he is officially removed from the office. But we do have the speech here. Ah, yes, an ad. You gotta love ads, folks, especially when we're not, we don't have to subscribe to everything. We're poor. But now that we're officially at this video, take a look.
It is clearly now the will of the Parliamentary Conservative Party that there should be a new leader of that party and therefore a new Prime Minister. And I've agreed with Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of our backbench MPs, that the process of choosing that new leader should begin now. And the reason I have fought so hard in the last few days to continue to deliver that mandate in person was not just because I wanted to do so, but because I felt it was my job, my duty, my obligation to you to continue to do what we promised in 2019. And to you, the British public. I know that there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world. But them's the breaks.
And that video is from the New York Times regarding and that is him delivering his official resignation address. That is not the full address. If you guys want to check it out, we do have the link to the Reuters, which actually has the entire address there in transcript for you guys. But Boris Johnson has officially resigned as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and now basically the race is on for whoever his successor will be. We jump down here into the Middle East, where Turkey seems to be moving a lot of armored vehicles, including MLRS and artillery systems, up into up towards Manbij, which is located in northern Syria. Manbij is part of that basically 30-kilometer zone. The military police of the armed forces of the Russian Federation accompanied the convoy of government troops into Manbij as one of the priority targets for the Turkish armed forces as part of the new military operation here in northern Syria. So let's take a look. We can see quite a massive amount of equipment being moved into this location. As we move over here into Iraq, here in Baghdad, human rights violations have been exposed here in Iraqi prisons. The Iraqi Observatory for Human Rights has confirmed continued torture and extradition of confessions in Iraqi prisons and pre-trial detention centers, indicated that members of the Iraqi government security forces use torture in several stages, but the most significant are those that occur in the preliminary investigation and investigation phases. The observatory also recorded numerous testimonies confirming the death of prisoners in prisons from torture, as well as the presence of murders of prisoners carried out by members of the investigating authorities and the security forces. As we move down here into the Babil government, also known as the Babylon government of Iraq, orchard fires continue here in Babil as the crop harvests continue to diminish already as a result of the ongoing drought and famine here in Iraq. It's not the only thing. As we jump down here, the drought also continues, causing major problems here in the Babil government, as the resources of water reservoirs and groundwater for irrigation of these agricultural systems have been completely exhausted at this point. Even those have dried up along with the rivers, such as the Tigris and the Euphrates. You can see some of these reservoirs and channels here for the irrigation systems. As we move here into the Gulf of Oman, we can see here that a massive Iranian weapons shipment was seized. The U.S. and Royal Navy collaborated to seize illegal weapons shipments from Iran destined for Yemen. This is coming from CENTCOM. And these are some of the newest classes of Iranian missiles that are being smuggled to the Yemeni rebels. Here in Afghanistan, within the Zabul and Kandahar regions, there is major flooding in Afghanistan that has led to the death of at least more than 30 people, as well as destruction of a house and the destruction of wheat crops and several hundred solar panels, each which cost anywhere from $80,000 to $120,000. Pretty substantial damage within this region. We're going to go ahead and take a look. Now, we did just get a question that kind of brings us back into Ukraine a little bit, and I know that's the hot topic, but the question was, do we know anything more about what happened to the soldiers, the Russian soldiers from Chernobyl, who decided to dig their entrenchment in the Red Forest, which is called the Red Forest because it's so highly radioactive, that from the Chernobyl exclusion zone. And the thing is, we don't. We had heard that one had died. Many were dying of radiation sickness, and then reports stopped coming in. That could be just because there's probably a crackdown on it, but we just don't know anything else regarding it. We haven't heard anything since we first reported on it, really. But yeah, we just don't have anything at this point. But as we jump back here over into the Middle East, it is confirmed between the Taliban and the resistance fronts of Afghanistan, led by Ahmad al-Massoud. The Taliban are being prepared in Dushanbe, which is in Tajikistan. So this was confirmed by sources of the FNSA that they would be having a meeting between the two groups and trying, I'm going to guess and say, to come to an agreement. The Taliban have consolidated their power with all but the exception of the SNFA or the FNSA, which is led once again by Ahmad al-Massoud. Ahmad al-Massoud's father actually fought against the Taliban throughout the 90s and the early 2000s until he was killed by the Taliban in an assassination. But he led the Northern Alliance and assisted coalition forces during the opening part of the invasion of Afghanistan. Jump up here to Uzbekistan, where Russia seems to have lost a rather valuable partnership. Uzbekistan has officially signed a partnership deal with the European Union, which is going to definitely damage the relations between these two countries, as the Russian Federation for a long time has been a rather close economic ally for the nation of Uzbekistan. But we can see that here. And that finally brings us up over here into North America, where we actually move over into the Sinaloa region. Mexican security forces have seized a record amount of fentanyl here in the Sinaloa region of Mexico. The Mexican Army and National Guard seized a record quantity of fentanyl in the northern state of Sinaloa earlier this week. According to a statement by the Ministry of Defense today, the seizure of 542.7 kilograms or 1,196.4 pounds of fentanyl, alongside 555 kilograms of meth, 31 kilograms of cocaine, 7 kilograms of heroin, and over 71,000 kilograms of chemical precursors, was carried out on a warehouse on Monday and resulted in 10 arrests. The warehouse had been run by members of organized crime, but did not give any further detail about the specifics of the group. Keep in mind, a large amount of Mexico is run by cartels, including the Sinaloa cartel, obviously for their name. So we can safely say that this is probably a cartel bust of one of whatever several cartels there are. In fact, the cartels are so powerful that they at times overpower government forces in several cases, as we've seen here on the channel. And we now have the interesting news of the day, which this one actually encompasses the whole world, because as of 7:15 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, we, at least for the most part, we will all be in the sunlight together. This is actually a really rare occurrence, but just based off the position of the sun or the globe in its orbit, and based off of where it is in its rotation, 90% of the world's population will be in daylight simultaneously, which comes out to about 6.4 billion people, while only about 1.2 billion people will actually be experiencing twilight and nighttime altogether. So pretty cool, and there's kind of a visual here for you guys to check it out. But the vast majority of the world will actually be in the sunlight. So I just thought it was a little bit interesting. And when we jump up here to Chicago, we can see that there's kind of a quantum flute that makes light move in ways we've never really seen before. The University of Chicago physicists have invented the quantum flute that, like the Pied Piper, can coerce particles of light to move move together in a way it's never been seen before. It really is a breaking point in quantum physics and quantum memories, and the new forms of error correction in quantum computers observing quantum phenomenon that cannot be seen in nature. So Associate Professor David Schuster said, just like in the musical instrument, you can send one or several wavelengths of photons across the whole thing, and each wavelength creates a note, quote unquote, that can be used to encode quantum information. So the interaction of the notes using a master quantum bit and several superconducting electrical circuits. So basically, what is this? It's a painstaking preparation, but what it is what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out a way, because scientists don't fully understand quantum mechanics, but we're trying to build a quantum computer, which would be insanely powerful of a computer. If done right, it would make our abilities of computing things ridiculous. There's a lot of really cool things that probably will explain that better. Precursor, for instance, has stuff regarding it. I think CGP Grey also has some stuff on it, but it's really cool if you guys want to check it out further. But basically, this is what it looks like. Looks big now, but this could change the way and actually help us better understand how we can actually build a quantum computer, which would be really cool and that makes you able to calculate things that are essentially incalculable right now, to have that ability. So, or if we were to build one of those, things that are beyond our comprehension or even our even imagination in some instances right now could be quite feasible with a quantum computer. Anyway, but that actually ends up being all of the news today. So if you guys want to check it out, if you guys want to check out the map, once again, it's on our website. You guys can go over there and check it out and kind of go through your guys' selves and look at some of this stuff. But there's obviously a lot of bad stuff going on in the world. We're talking about death and famine and war and disease and all sorts of stuff. Organized crime, but luckily you guys can help, and that's the awesome thing about this community is the whole project, it revolves around wanting to be the news that gives back. We do this because we want to give back to the very news that we're talking about on the channel every single day. And if you check out in the video description, you're going to see a ton of different links down there that is specifically for that purpose. You guys have been awesome in supporting those organizations thus far, and we continue to go through and vet. We're vetting several now to get added to that list. If you have any more, please let us know. Our Discord link is also in the description. Join us on our Discord, and that way you guys can hop in there. Of course, you can check out the Discord and the community we have on there, but you guys can also get in touch with a staff member and send us a link to any charities you might have, as well as a short kind of a short summary of what they do, so that way we have something to go off of, and then we can go through our vetting process and hopefully get them added to the stream. And so we're never doing super chats on the channel. We're never pushing merchandise or anything like that. We do not agree with that. We really do not want to profit off of people's misery, essentially. So if you guys, so once we get large enough, we're actually going to be putting the fundraisers directly onto the stream on every single stream we do, just like we do in the description. And the description's just not going to go away either. So if you guys if you guys can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's fine. Just give us a like and subscribe, and tell your friends about us, because the more people that are here, the more overall good we can do throughout the world, and that's what I would like to do. I would like to have a big impact on the globe and the news stories that we're talking about. I would love to raise millions of dollars if I could with this channel for people all over the world that could greatly use our help. So thank you for supporting us in the endeavor. Thank you for supporting those organizations. I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. I really don't want any of the viewers to become a statistic in any of these topics that we talk about. And if you're not safe, I really hope that you guys find that safety and security in the very near future. So please be safe. Tomorrow is Friday, so it's the end of the week. You guys can look forward to having us wrap up your week tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time and 9 p.m. Central, as we conduct another news stream covering the 24 hours of news on Friday. And so I hope you guys will join us then, and hopefully you'll bring some friends as well. But other than that, I will talk to you guys later. My name is Paul from the New News, and everyone have a fantastic rest of your night.